FNAF fan games are a guilty pleasure of mine. Games that, in all honesty, I don't play very often, and yet they're a massive staple of the FNAF community as a whole. You have your usual stuff like Five Nights at Candy's, Pop Goes, and Juniors, but then you have the more obscure and unknown games of the community. Oh hey, that's the title of the video. Enter Five Nights at Nutty's, a relatively unknown FNAF fan game series that has gone under the radar of the FNAF fan game scene. However, surprisingly, I did not discover this game via the original. I instead discovered it via the upcoming remake of the game titled Five Nights at Nutty's Reimagined. And when compared to the original, this game looks significantly better from a design standpoint. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. To properly understand the origins of this game, we're going to have to go through each game in the series one by one. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the world of Five Nights at Nutty's, the most obscure FNAF fan game series. Oh, that's the title of the video again. January 4th, 2017, the day in which game developer Sona released the first mainline entry to the Five Nights at Nutty's series, and the reason this video even exists in the first place. Five Nights at Nutty's takes place in Nutty's Nachos, a small local restaurant that is set to open soon with a cast of animatronic characters, soon to be set up at the location. Like most FNAF fan games, you take on the role of a security guard watching over the place from 12 AM to 6 AM, fending off against the spooky animatronics that roam the place at night. You get the idea by now. I know you've played FNAF fan games before. Why else would you be watching this video? Now, as far as I can tell, Nutty's was Sonakai's first fully 3D rendered game, and it shows. I'm not going to joke on this game too hard because 1, it's over 8 years old, and 2, this game was clearly purely made out of passion, and that's something I can always respect, being a game dev myself. With that being said, I would be lying if I said this game was a masterpiece. Starting off with night 1, we are dumped inside our security office, a very basic looking one at that, consisting of just a table, a poster, 2 doors, and a large hall behind us. One of the main gimmicks of Nutty's are these 2 doors. You see, in FNAF 1, to prevent the player from keeping the doors closed all night, you are given a limited amount of power. In Nutty's, however, there is no power limit, and so to compensate for this, you are only able to close 1 door at a time, which becomes a major problem on later nights, but we'll get into that later. Night 1 is fairly simple. The only animatronic present in the building is the main man himself, Nutty. Nutty's mechanics are pretty simple. If you press out one of the 2 front doors, just shut it until he goes away. If he's in the hall behind you, just stare at him for a few seconds until he wanders off. Piece of cake, a simple start to the game. Hey, so quick side note here that I wanted to mention real quick. Like in FNAF, there is a phone guy in this game, but he doesn't really tell you what to do. He just kind of lore dumps the entire game. So for majority of the playthrough, I got this mechanic completely wrong and thought that you had to flip the monitor up and down until Nutty went away. So if you see me doing that in the background, that's why. Alright, back to the video. Night 2 is also pretty easy with only one new enemy to deal with, that being Harry Hat. Harry works the same way mechanic-wise as Nutty. If you press up one of the doors, shut it. If you press the hall behind you, stare at him until he leaves. Not much to write home about this night, so we're moving on to Night 3. Night 3 brings in the next animatronic to the mix, Plush It. Well, I say an animatronic, but according to the phone guy, he's actually a plushie that was shipped to a location with an endoskeleton in it. Why, I'm not sure, but cool, I guess. Plushie is a lot harder to spot than Nutty and Harry because of how small he is, so you're going to have to listen to his audio cues to figure out when he arrives. Unlike Nutty and Harry, Plushie will only appear in the hall behind you. When he arrives, you must stare at him until he leaves. Failing to do so will cause Plushie to enter your office, which will disable your doors for the rest of the night. Night 4 introduces, you guessed it, another new animatronic, this time named Bob. I'm serious, that's his fucking name, look it up. I don't even know what he's meant to be. I mean, like, plush, yeah, I can kind of see how he's meant to be a plushie, even with that bulbous head of his, but Bob, I'm not entirely sure. According to the wiki, he's a humanoid animatronic. Yes, there's a Five Nights at Nutty's wiki, but honestly, I don't see it. The ears make me think he's some fucked up looking cat, so I'm just gonna roll with that for the rest of the video. Bob is also pretty simple to deal with. If he appears at the hall behind you, stare at him until he leaves. If he appears at one of your doors, shut them. Hey, wait a minute. Yeah, so if you couldn't tell by now, every single animatronic in Five Nights at Nutty's functions the exact same. The only exception to this big plushie who doesn't kill you when he gets into your office. This isn't necessarily a bad thing on its own, but combined with the whole only being able to close one door at a time mechanic, it gets really annoying on later nights. There are times where 2 animatronics will be at your door at once, and you just gotta switch the door from left to right rapidly and hope that eventually one of them leaves. An idea that may seem good in concept, but in practice, it's insanely frustrating. It also just makes the cameras essentially useless the entire game. I swear, I literally beat Night 5 without checking the cameras once. However, once again, this game was made over 8 years ago, so I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt with this one. The final night, Night 5 introduces the final animatronic. I'm not fucking spelling that. According to the wiki, him and Bob are both decommissioned animatronics at the location, so there's a bit of finance and Nutty's lore for you all. You can probably also guess by now that he also functions the exact same as the other animatronics. If he's at the door, shut it. If he's in the hall, start him until he leaves. And just like that, that's everything from the first game covered. Apart from a few odd design choices and some promising yet iffy mechanics, Nutty's one was actually alright. Like I said before, the game's not a masterpiece by any means, but it's a fun, simple fan game with some fun concepts and some alright characters. Overall, I'd rate this game a 9 out of 10. Oh, but person watching this video, we're not done just yet. Notice how I said Nutty's 1. Five Nights at Nutty's 2. That's right, there's a sequel. You thought I titled this video the most obscure FNAF fan game series for no reason? Oh my dear viewer, we aren't done with this series just yet. Released on February 25th, 2019, Five Nights at Nutty's 2, as the title suggests, is the direct sequel to Five Nights at Nutty's with a whole cast of new characters, new gameplay mechanics, and a brand new storyline. So let's just jump straight into it. Nutty's 2 takes place in an underground bunker? Storage facility? I'm not really sure, but the point is you've been kidnapped by a guy named Thomas Ford, the creator of the Nutty's animatronics, and old friend of the protagonist, Donald Acker, the owner of Nutty's Nachos. It's not really known why he did this, other than mentioning the fact we backstabbed him or something. I don't know, man. I don't know my Five Nights at Nutty's lore. I'm sorry. Now, one thing I will say before we get into the game itself is that Nutty's 2 is a huge improvement over its predecessor. It's not perfect, but both the designs and gameplay have been improved upon significantly since last time, which makes sense considering the team for this game was a lot larger than Nutty's 1. Nutty's 2 opens up with a short intro minigame where we play as who I'm assuming is meant to be Donald coming home from work. There's many things you can interact with in the house, one of the more notable ones being these plushies of the original Freddy's animatronics, seemingly hinting at the fact Nutty's and FNAF take place in the same universe. Something that was hinted at heavily via phone calls of the first game, but never outright confirmed until now. Jumping straight to night 1, like Nutty's 1, our first animatronic to become active is Nutty himself, more specifically Beta Nutty, now with a creepier design, albeit a bit shorter than his appearance in the first game. In Nutty's 2, the animatronics will move between a set amount of rooms before reaching your office. Now you can close the office door if they get to you, but it only lasts for a short amount of time before it breaks, and allows the animatronics to get inside, so this is more of a last resort if anything. To keep the animatronics away from your office, you need to use your flashlight to distract the animatronics and lead them into other rooms. Rooms with a single door can always be closed temporarily, but if they are left closed for too long, the animatronic in said room will break down the door and make it unusable for the rest of the night. You can also only close one room at a time, similar to the door mechanic in Nutty's 1. Overall, I love this gameplay loop so much more compared to the one present in Nutty's 1, as it keeps some of the same core ideas, only being allowed to close one door at a time and such, while also choosing the gameplay in a way that feels fresh and unique, being able to use some of the ideas from Nutty's 1 and making them actually work fluidly with the rest of the mechanics. Just like Nutty's 1, Night 2 introduces our second animatronic, Beta Harry Hat, now with a more humanoid design compared to his appearance in the first game. Harry works the same gameplay wise as Nutty, but he's a lot faster. This is where the whole trapping animatronics in rooms mechanic comes into play, as sometimes you'll have to deal with both Nutty and Harry at once, and will need to trap one of them in a room while you deal with the other. Like I said before, this is a really solid gameplay addition that complements the mechanics of the animatronics well, and I like it a lot. The third animatronic to be added to the roster on Night 3 is Beta Plushie. When I first saw this design, I had no idea it was even Plushie. I honestly thought this was a new animatronic altogether, but nope, it's 100% Plushie apparently. Overall, this design, like the others in this game, is a huge improvement over the original. Unlike before where Plushie was this weird unholy abomination that looks like he just swallowed a bomb, this new design for Plushie resembles a peanut with two small arms and a stitched up mouth. It's honestly a really cute design and it fits with the whole nut theme Nutty has going on. Me like. Alongside Plushie, a new mechanic is added this night, the desk fan. On Night 3, it's revealed that Thomas implanted a sensor inside the desk fan in the office, and set to where if it's on for too long, it gets progressively louder, lowering animatronics to your location and making your flashlight useless to them. To prevent this, you must turn off the fan using a large switch to the right of your office that, when pulled, resets the fan but also resets your cameras, meaning you have to pick the correct time to play or risk getting jump scared. Night 4 introduces technically the first new animatronic to the game, one that I have very mixed feelings on. This is Crunch, an animatronic squirrel that was going to act as a villain character in the original Nutty's Nachos location, whose purpose was to, and I quote, attempt to crack Nutty open and eat his insides out. No, I'm not kidding, this is actually what is said in the game. Anyways, moving on from that, I'm gonna be honest, I don't really like this design. Not because it's bad or anything, but I think there's a bit too much going on with it compared to the other animatronics. He doesn't really fit in, which I think was the point since he's meant to be a scrapped character and all, but still, it kind of bugs me a little. And I get why he's designed this way. He's meant to be dressed like a nutcracker because his purpose was to literally crack Nutty open because he's a nut. He's a squirrel. But regardless, I still think it's a bit much. Unlike the others, Crunch cannot be held back by any of the doors of the location, and will instead chew on the wires powering it, leading it to malfunction and turn on and off at random throughout the night, basically making them useless. So, the only way to keep him away is by luring him with your light. A small mechanic change, but one that freshens up the gameplay loop nonetheless. And lastly, the final animatronic added on night 5 is Withered Bonnie? Yeah, so Withered Bonnie is in this game for some reason. I wasn't really paying attention to the phone calls, but from what I gathered, Thomas found the Wizards backstage during some birthday party at Freddy's, got inspired, and that's why he decided to make animatronics. In honor of this, for the game he's created in this facility, he's recreated Withered Bonnie with the purpose of killing us. Bit random, but you know, it's fine, I guess. Fucking Withered Bonnie. I'm gonna be honest, gameplay wise, I hate Withered Bonnie the most, simply because this mechanic deviates from the core gameplay loop so much. I know how Nutty's one I was complaining about the exact opposite, but that was because every single animatronic had the same mechanic, which was just shut door or stare at them. In Nutty's 2, however, while all the animatronics have similar mechanics, they're different enough to the point where it doesn't feel copy and pasted. Withered Bonnie, however, has a mechanic completely separate from the game loop of the previous animatronics, with him crawling through the vents of the building that have an entirely separate layout from the main map, and you have to shut the vent openings to stop him from reaching the office. By adding this completely different mechanic into the mix out of absolutely nowhere, that doesn't tie to the pre-existing gameplay loop whatsoever, it just startles the player and leaves them confused. I get what the devs were trying to do here with Withered Bonnie, but it just isn't my cup of tea, I'm sorry. Anyhow, that's all there is to cover when it comes to Nutty 2. Overall, this game is a huge improvement from the first game, both in terms of visuals, gameplay, and characters. I actually really liked it. There were some odd choices here and there, but overall it was a solid, fun, and engaging fan game. No doubt of not. And with that, we've covered every single game in the Nutties. Wait, hold on. Do you guys hear that? What the fuck?! So do you all remember at the start of the video how I said, I did not discover this game via the original. I instead discovered it via the upcoming remake of the game titled Five Nights at Nutty's Reimagined. Well, I lied, kind of. You see, this game is actually what introduced me to the Nutty's remake when I saw a trailer for it on the Fangames of Freddy's YouTube channel, a topic that could honestly get a video of its own someday, which then led me to discovering the rest of the series. So technically, this is how I discovered the Nutty series. Being the most recent game in the Nutty's franchise, Nutty's Game Night is a short spin-off of Five Nights at Nutty's where you play Uno with Nutty. That's it, you just play Uno with Nutty. That's the entire game. There's no hidden secrets, there's nothing at all. That's just the entire game. There isn't much to write home about this game because, well, there's not much to talk about in general, but I felt the need to include it nonetheless with it being the most recent entry of the franchise and all. Before we move on, there is also technically another spin-off to Nutty's one I haven't talked about yet because, like Nutty's Game Night, there's not much to talk about it, but I'll briefly mention it anyway. Nut is a spin-off of Five Nights at Nutty's made right after the release of the first Nutty's game. All it is an RPG style game with the cast from the first Nutty's game. That's it. Like I said before, nothing to write home about, but felt the need to include it nonetheless. And with that, we've covered every single game in the Nutty's franchise. Or at least, for now. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, Five Nights at Nutty's is getting a full reimagining with new redesigns, new environments, new gameplay, and more that hasn't been revealed yet. I'll leave a link to the game's Twitter account in the description. I highly recommend checking it out. Like I said before, I actually discovered this whole franchise via this reimagining while I was scrolling through Twitter one day, and since then, I've kind of grown a weird attachment to the series. It's not amazing by any means, nor is it a masterpiece, but has a certain charm to it that I can admire. So Five Nights at Nutty's, thank you for existing. Pretty great. Not perfect, but great.